Years later, when I try to remember the first time I truly thought we might all be swept away, I don't see flags or generals. I remember the sound of water. Not a river, not exactly. Just a constant, sucking noise under everything else. The Chickahominy swelling in the low ground, rain beating into the mud, boots pulling loose with a wet, tearing sound that never quite stopped. It felt like the earth itself was trying to drag us under. We had left Williamsburg behind us some weeks before, but it hadn't really left us. There was mud there. There was mud here. Only this mud was deeper. Our camp lay scattered through the trees near the Chickahominy, half on solid ground, half on land that pretended to be solid until you put weight on it. Tents sagged. Campfires smoked more than they burned. The air smelled of wet wool, damp canvas, and sickness. Sam's canteen hung at my side, dented and scuffed, tapping against my hip whenever I walked. I had told myself I would send it to his family when the campaign ended. The campaign never seemed to end. "River's gone up again," Callahan said that morning, squinting toward the low, misty ground where the Chickahominy lay invisible behind trees and swamp. "It can't go much higher," Jensen answered. Callahan snorted. "Don't say that. Every time a man says that, the world takes it as a dare." Jensen managed a thin smile at that. It was more than he'd had at Williamsburg. He still carried his fear like an extra piece of kit, but he carried it. I was tightening my cartridge box strap when the first distant boom rolled across the trees. It was not close. Not like Williamsburg. Not yet. We all paused a moment, listening. "Probably just our batteries trying their range," someone muttered. Another boom answered it. Then another, faster this time, overlapping. Heads turned. Harding stepped out from his tent, coat half buttoned, eyes already searching the tree line. "Artillery?" I asked. "Too much for a drill," he said. The ground under my boots felt unsteady, as though the waterlogged soil were vibrating with each report. Somewhere not far off, a mule brayed, then went abruptly silent. A runner appeared at the edge of camp, splattered with mud to the waist. "Enemy attack on the left," he shouted. "Heavier than expected. They're pushing hard. Be ready to move." "Who's under it?" Briggs called. "Casey's division," the runner said. "They're catching the worst of it." He was already moving on as he finished speaking, delivering the same message to the next cluster of tents. Callahan spat into the mud. "Poor devils." Harding's voice cut through the muttering. "Pack light and stand to. We may be shifting to support. Keep your gear tight and your wits tighter." The rain began again in earnest, coming down slantwise through the trees, pattering on tent canvas and tin cups, turning puddles into small, muddy ponds. The sound of artillery grew thicker, a rolling mutter behind the curtain of rain. I checked my rifle, then my pack, then Sam's canteen. My fingers lingered on the dented metal a moment longer than they needed to. "I thought after Williamsburg they'd be done chasing us in the rain for a while," Jensen said. "They won't be done until Richmond," Briggs answered, "and even then I wouldn't trust it." "If we ever get there," Mills added. Harding started moving along the line, giving orders in low, steady tones. "Company, fall in by files. Stay close to the road. If it washes out, we'll go by the trees. Keep your intervals and watch your step. If you go down in the swamp, we may not get you back." That wasn't a figure of speech. Men had gone into the mud near the Chickahominy and taken far too long to come out. We formed up as best we could, rifles at the shoulder, packs biting into wet cloth. My boots squelched with each shift of weight. The air felt heavy and close, despite the rain. Then from somewhere ahead, closer than the cannons, a fresh sound cut through. Musketry. A long, ripping volley. Then another. The line stiffened. "Thought the attack was on the left," Jensen said. "Sounds like it's stretching," Briggs answered quietly. "Can they do that?" Jensen asked. "They can do whatever their commanders tell them," Briggs said, "and whatever the river lets them." The Chickahominy was between much of our army now, some corps on one side, some on the other. We had all heard the talk: bridges not finished, roads turned to soup, men cut off from support if the water rose much further. "Are we cut off?" I asked. Harding glanced back at me. There was a brief hesitation before he answered. "Not yet," he said, "but if we don't move smart today, we might be by nightfall." There was no drum roll, no grand signal. A simple order came down the line instead. "Forward!" We stepped off into the mud and the rain, guns already firing somewhere ahead, the swollen river at our backs. I remember thinking, as the sound of battle grew louder with each squelching step, that we were not just marching toward the enemy this time. We were marching toward the edge of something. We just didn't know what it was called yet. The road toward the firing was not a road anymore. It was a brown river pretending to be one. Wagons had churned the ground into deep furrows, and the rain had filled every hollow. Men walked with their trousers hitched up as far as they could go, and it still wasn't enough. Mud climbed our legs, soaked our socks, found its way into our boots and stayed there. "Feels like the earth's trying to eat us," Callahan muttered, dragging one foot free with a wet, ripping sound. "If it does, it'll spit us right back out," Jensen said, a wryness in his voice that would have been impossible a month earlier. "That's the spirit," Briggs said. "If the ground doesn't want you, that means you've got to stick around." We all knew what lay behind his words. The ground had wanted Sam. I touched the canteen at my side again, feeling the familiar dent beneath my fingers. I didn't have to look to know his initials were still there, smudged but readable. I had traced them enough times in the dark. We passed artillery trying to move forward. Teams of horses strained in the mud, flanks slick with sweat and rain. Men pushed at the wheels, shouting, boots sliding. Every few yards they had to stop, catch their breath and try again. "Tell the guns to wait their turn," someone in the ranks called. "We're drowning back here." No one laughed, but the remark loosened a few shoulders. The firing ahead grew louder. It had a different sound than Williamsburg. There, the fight had been a tug-of-war over solid ground. Here, it sounded less like lines striking and more like something coming apart. We began to meet wounded men moving the other way. Some walked with help. Some leaned on muskets like canes. Some lay in wagons or on doors pressed into service as stretchers, faces pale and slack as they rocked with every jolt. Their uniforms were spattered with mud beyond recognition. What had started blue or gray, all blurred into the same drowning brown. "Whose division?" Briggs asked, one man being half carried between two comrades. "KCS," the man gasped. "They came on hard, hit us before we were ready. Whole line bent, thought we could hold, couldn't." He was pulled past us, swallowed by the column of wounded and stragglers. "Thought this was supposed to be our attack," Jensen said. "Not today," Briggs answered. "Not here. Today we're the ones plugging holes." As we pushed on, the road deteriorated further. In places, it simply disappeared, sinking into swampy pools that reflected the gray sky in broken, shivering pieces. We left the track and moved among the trees, following a path of trodden grass and broken brush that others had made before us in haste. Harding kept close now, on foot like the rest of us, reins of his horse given to a mounted orderly somewhere back along the trail. "Keep your eyes on the man ahead," he said. "If the ground looks too soft, go around. If you can't go around, go fast. I don't want anyone stuck when the firing reaches us." He looked tired but not rattled. If there was doubt in him, he buried it where we couldn't see. "Think they'll break through?" Mills asked him, the question too large to stay unspoken. "If they were going to break through cleanly," Harding said, "we wouldn't be moving up. The fact that we're called means someone thinks there's still a line to hold, so that's what we'll do." It made a kind of sense. In war, sense is often the best you can hope for. The cannon fire grew sharper. We could pick out individual guns now, some farther off, some near enough that the air shook with each report. Through gaps in the trees, we glimpsed low ground holding rainwater like a basin, the Chickahominy winding swollen and brown beyond. Bridges, half-built or half-flooded, loomed in the mist like skeletons. Somewhere out there, parts of our army were cut off by the rising water. That knowledge sat in my gut like a stone. If we failed to hold, there might be nowhere to fall back to. Sam's canteen tapped gently against my side as I walked. The sound was small under the guns, but it was there. I told myself that, if the river did swallow us, I wanted to be the one to carry that canteen as far as I could. It wasn't much of a vow, but sometimes small promises are all a man has to put between himself and panic. We heard the broken line before we saw it. Voices first, too many of them, too close together, rising and falling without rhythm. Then the sound of men stumbling through underbrush and mud, not in step, not under orders. Finally they appeared between the trees ahead, Union soldiers, faces streaked with sweat and grime, some without hats, some without rifles, coming back the way we were going. They were not running exactly. Most walked or half-walked, as if their legs had forgotten how to do anything else. But their eyes were turned behind them, not ahead. Harding raised his hand. "Make way, but don't give ground," he called. "Let them pass, but the regiment holds here." The stream of men flowed around us like water around a rock. "What unit?" Briggs asked one as he went by. "KCS," the man breathed, "or what's left of it." Another added, "They hit us hard, out of the trees. We never saw the start of it. We tried to stand. The left gave way. Once a piece goes, the rest follows." "When did you fall back?" Harding asked. The man blinked, as if the question belonged to some distant world. "Don't know, feels like all day, feels like 5 minutes." He moved on, swallowed by the rearward flow. Jensen watched them pass, his jaw clenched. "They look like they've been chewed," he said quietly. "So do we," Callahan answered. "We're just not swallowed yet." An officer from another brigade rode up, splashing mud. "You're the reinforcing regiment," he barked. "Part of it," Harding replied. "Good, forward another 200 yards. You'll form on the right of what's still holding. The enemy's pressing there. You'll know you're close when you start wishing you were." He spurred his horse on before we could ask more. "Comforting fellow," Callahan muttered. We moved again, this time with less space between trees. Musket fire cracked ahead in uneven clumps, sometimes answered, sometimes not. The smoke was thicker here, trapped under the low branches. We passed abandoned knapsacks, broken muskets, a hat lying upside down in a puddle, filling slowly. Someone had jammed a bayonet into the soil by the path. No one stopped to claim it. The closer we drew, the more the air tasted of powder and something sourer, fear, sweat, the breath of too many men pressed too close together. An officer on foot appeared out of the smoke, almost walking into our front rank. "You're the 1st Minnesota," he shouted. "Yes," Harding answered. "Good, you're plugging this gap here. Enemies pushing in that direction." He pointed through the trees where the ground seemed to dip and then rise again. "You hold this. Whatever else happens, you hold this." "And who's on our flank?" Harding asked. The officer gave a short, humorless laugh. "Right now, God and whoever hasn't fallen back yet form up." That was how we learned where the line was. We walked until someone told us here, and then we stopped. We dressed the line as best we could between trees, men spreading out just enough to fire and not enough to leave holes. Briggs moved along us, adjusting a man here, a man there, until it looked something like a company again. Jensen stood next to me. His breathing was fast, but his shoulders were back. "They broke," he said, nodding toward the direction Casey's men had gone, "and we're replacing them." "Yes," I said. "Does that mean we're braver?" "No," I said, "it means it's our turn." He swallowed at that, but he didn't argue. Ahead through drifting smoke, I saw shapes moving on the far rise. Gray coats, dark hats, flags I couldn't quite make out. They were closer than I liked. closer than anyone liked. Somewhere to our far right, cheering rose ragged and strained. Whether it was ours or theirs, I couldn't tell. An older version of me, the one telling this now, knows what the reports said later. They spoke of divisions engaged, brigades committed, lines reformed along this swampy, miserable front. What I remember is this. A battered line fell back. We stepped into the space they left. And the enemy kept coming. The order came as simply as all the others. Forward and fire at will. No drum roll, no speech. Just those words, shouted down the ragged line by men whose throats were already raw. We moved a few paces ahead, enough to bring the enemy fully into view through the trees. Confederate infantry were advancing across the uneven ground, wading through the same mud, the same pools, the same torn earth we had just passed. Their flags whipped damply in the air, color dulled by rain and smoke. "Wait," Briggs called, "wait." The first rank steadied their muskets. Jensen's hands were tight on his rifle, knuckles pale. Now, we fired. Our volley went out in a ragged crash. Smoke billowed in front of us, thick and sharp. My shoulder kicked back with the recoil, familiar and still jarring. Shapes stumbled out there on the far slope. Some went down. Most kept coming. Load. Powder ball, ramrod, cap. The actions blurred together, less separate movements and more one weary habit. The Confederates fired back. Their volley sounded deeper than ours, as if more barrels had spoken. Balls hissed through the trees, thudded into trunks, snapped branches, struck the ground with wet, ugly sounds. A man 2 files over grunted and folded at the waist, dropping as if someone had cut a string inside him. Another let out a sharp curse, clutching his arm where cloth darkened quickly. We fired again. And again. After the first few exchanges, the neat idea of volley gave way to something messier. Men fired as they loaded. Some alone, some in small groups, some almost on top of each other. The sound lost its clean edge and became a continuous snarl. The air grew thicker. One moment I could see the enemy clearly, faces tensed, mouths open in shouts, muskets raised. The next, they were shadows behind a gray curtain. "Keep it hot," someone yelled. "Don't let them dress their line." We did not let it cool, but neither did they. Jensen flinched each time a ball slapped into the tree in front of us. Bark flew in little bursts, stinging our faces. Once a splinter sliced his cheek. Blood mixed with the rain, running thin and pink down his jaw. "You're hit," I said. "It's nothing," he answered, though his voice shook. "If it doesn't knock you down, it doesn't count." "That's a foolish way to measure," I said. "It's the only one that lets me keep moving," he replied. He reloaded. He fired. His shots were not always well aimed, but they went in the right direction. That counted for more than I would have admitted a month ago. The battle narrowed to the strip of ground in front of us. I knew somewhere beyond the trees, other regiments were fighting, other lines were forming and breaking. Reports later would talk about the whole field. All I saw was the part of it where I stood. Men in gray pushed up the slope. We fired into them. They fired into us. Neither side surged nor collapsed. We were stuck in a grinding exchange neither had planned. Both were trapped in. A shell burst overhead, showering us with dirt and bits of branch. Someone fell. Someone else shouted for a stretcher that could not reach us here. Through a gap in the smoke, I glimpsed officers in gray gesturing with swords, trying to push their line onward. Through another, I saw a section of our own flank bending back, men taking a step rearward before catching themselves and holding where they stood. "How do we know if we're winning?" Jensen asked, voice rough. "We don't," I said, "not from here." "Then what are we doing?" "We're not letting them through." It sounded simple when I said it. It did not feel simple. The fighting swelled and ebbed around us. Sometimes the enemy pressed closer. Sometimes they seemed to fall back a few yards before rallying. The ground between us filled with bodies and broken branches, and things I tried not to see too clearly. Once, during a brief lull, I heard a man crying out for water from somewhere ahead. I could not see him. I could only hear. My hand went to Sam's canteen. "I can't reach him," I said aloud, though no one had asked. "Reach who?" Jensen asked. "The one calling." He listened for a moment, then looked away. "We can't even reach the men next to us half the time," he said. "We do what we can in the strip of earth we're standing on. The rest belongs to someone else." He said it with a steadiness he hadn't had at Williamsburg. Fear still lived in his voice, but it had company now, something like acceptance. The maelstrom did not end with a charge or a retreat. It wore itself down. By degrees. The volleys came less often. The gaps between them lengthened. Our officers still shouted, but their voices sounded more like reminders than commands now. "Steady. Watch your front. Hold where you are." We held. The enemy did not vanish. They didn't turn and run in some grand, rolling wave. They simply fired less, moved less, became, slowly, shapes on the far rise again, rather than a force threatening to sweep directly through us. What the reports call repulsing an attack often feels, when you're there for it, like two exhausted men finally letting go of each other at the same time. The test for Jensen came after the worst of the firing had passed. It did not arrive with drums or bugles. It came with a simple, ugly thing, a gap. Somewhere to our right, a section of line had thinned too far. Men had fallen, or been pulled back wounded, or drifted a little too close to the trees behind us. However it happened, I looked over and saw the space. Not huge. Just wide enough that, if the enemy had rushed at that moment, they might have forced a wedge into us. Briggs saw it too. He grabbed my sleeve. "Take 3 men and fill that," he said, "now before they notice." I swallowed. "Jensen, Mills, Callahan," I called, "with me." We moved sideways through the mud, boots slipping, feet catching on roots and broken branches. Every step felt louder than it was. I imagined eyes on us from the far slope, counting, marking. The gap grew clearer as we approached. On one side, a clump of men firing steadily. On the other, another little knot doing the same. Between them, nothing but churned earth and a single split fence post. We stepped into the space, as if walking onto a stage we had not rehearsed for. "Down on one knee," I said. "Use the post for cover. Jensen, you're forward. Mills, you're with him. Callahan with me here." Jensen blinked. "Why me forward?" "Because you're already looking at it," I said. "And because if you're watching that opening, I know you won't run from it." He went pale at that, but he nodded. "Fair." We knelt, boots sinking further. The fence post wasn't much, but it was something. We set our rifles across it, barrels trained toward the slope. For a moment, nothing moved. The fort loomed. Smoke drifted. My heart thudded loud enough I could feel it in my fingertips. Then 3 figures in gray appeared through the haze, moving low, half-bent, as if testing the space. "Now," I said. We fired together. The 3 shapes dropped or fell back. Behind them, others hesitated, checked, slid sideways instead of forward. "They tried it," Callahan said. "They found someone home." Jensen stared at the place where the men had been. "I shot at a man whose face I could see," he said. "Not just a shape, his face." "Do you remember it?" I asked. "I'm trying not to," he said. "I think that's the part that scares me more." He reloaded anyway. His hands shook, but they moved. More movement on the slope. A few men in gray testing, shifting, looking for an easier place to press. Finding none. We fired again, and again, careful now, not wasting shots, not pulling the trigger just to make noise. We weren't going to win the battle by ourselves. But in that little strip of earth, We were not going to let anyone through. "Good," Briggs called from behind us. "That's it, hold like that. You see them try, you answer. You don't have to chase them, just keep them honest." After a time, the attempts grew fewer. That didn't mean safety. It meant the attack was bleeding out, at least on our front. Jensen stayed there at the forward edge, eyes open, breath measured, watching the ground in front of our small position as if his will alone might hold it together. "You're doing it," I said quietly. "Doing what?" "What you said you couldn't," I answered. "You're scared, you're still here, that's the whole of it." He was quiet for a moment. "I thought courage would feel different," he said at last. "How did you think it would feel?" "Cleaner," he said, "less like trying not to be sick." "Maybe that's for the stories," I said, "not for the men who lived them." A much older version of me, the one choosing these words now, still believes that. Courage, when I saw it, rarely looked like bronze statues and clean uniforms. Most days it looked like Jensen mud-soaked, shaking, terrified, and refusing to move backward. By the time the fighting faded to scattered shots and low, distant rumbles, the light was starting to go. The sky over the Chickahominy dulled from gray to a kind of bruised blue. The trees turned from shapes into silhouettes. Lanterns flickered into life in the rear, one by one like cautious stars. We held our strip of ground until someone with more rank than sense decided it was enough for the day. "Hold here through the night," the order came. "Pickets forward, low fires in the rear. Be ready to move at first light, enemy still in force." Of course they were. We withdrew a little, just enough to be out of the worst of the range, and sank where we could, against fence rails, tree trunks, the sides of shallow pits that had seemed like cover in daylight and now looked like mud-lined graves waiting for occupants. Stretcher bearers moved among us, picking their way through the debris of the fight. Sometimes they stopped to lift a man gently. Sometimes they walked past faster, eyes down. The river's smell thickened as the air cooled, a damp, sour scent that settled into our clothes and didn't leave. "They'll call this something, won't they?" Mills said quietly as he sank down beside me. "Some name that fits in a line of print." "If they do, I doubt it will sound like what it was," I said. "What was it?" he asked. "Wet," I said, loud, confused, too close. He huffed something like a laugh. Jensen slid down on my other side, his back to a stump, knees up. He looked emptied out, but not broken. "I thought Williamsburg was the worst day I'd see," he said. "You said that about Yorktown, too," Callahan said as he joined us. "You're going to run out of worse days at this rate." Jensen actually smiled at that. A small one. But it was real. I loosened my belt a notch, feeling the fabric cling cold to my skin. Sam's canteen bumped lightly against my hip. "I keep thinking I should send this home," I said, almost to myself. "Why don't you?" Jensen asked. "Because I don't know what to write to go with it," I answered. "What do you tell a mother about a boy who vanished in a ravine and whose canteen you carried through 2 battles and a river that wanted to drown you?" "Tell her he was brave," Jensen said. "He was scared," I replied. "So were we," Jensen said. "You don't have to lie, just don't leave him out." The idea stayed with me longer than he knew. Somewhere behind us, officers argued over maps and roads and what exactly had been gained or lost that day. Somewhere, someone counted the casualties and tried to match numbers to names. For me, the battle settled into smaller measures. We had come up to support a broken line. We had not broken. We stood through the worst of it. The enemy did not roll over us. That was what the river kept that day. Not victory. Not glory. Just the simple fact that, in a place where ground turned to water and orders turned to noise, a handful of men in a muddy strip of Virginia woods held long enough for the army not to be swept entirely away. It did not feel like triumph. It felt like surviving. Years later, when people asked what Seven Pines or Fair Oaks or any of those names meant, I never told them about the maps or the generals or the communiques. I told them about the sound of water under everything, the feel of the mud trying to claim our boots, Jensen's hands shaking on his rifle and not letting go, Sam's canteen tapping against my side as we pressed forward, then held, then tried to sleep sitting up in our coats because the ground was too wet to lie down. We thought in those days that the river and the mud and the confusion were the worst the war could throw at us. We were wrong, but that is another memory, another march, another field, and another story.